Hi everyone, thanks for joining. This is Ralph Stubenrauch. I'm part of the professional services team here at eRAD, and I'd like to welcome you to the third edition of eRAD Tips and Tricks. Today we'll be talking about advanced worklist filtering and conditional formatting. So let's start. I'm going to assume you already know some of the basic worklist filtering functions, like clicking below the column header to insert your filter values, or clicking the martini glass icon to the right of the input field to choose your filtering mode, like contains, does not contain, starts with, etc., things like that. Some other columns do give you an option to select values. I'm thinking most of you probably know that already, but quickly, you do have the option to select values, and when you do that, a new dialog box opens with a list of possible filters or values to filter with. You can choose those values you'd like to filter on, move them over to the selected values column with a double arrow button in the middle there, the one pointing to the right. In this case, I'm going to pick CT and also MRI. I'm going to choose that one as well. And you can see here in your list now, it has changed your filter mode to equals and added those two values here. And now we can see our list just has CTs and MRs in it, no longer has ultrasound. Let's go a little bit more advanced and talk about some special characters you can use to filter, particularly the and sign or ampersand we use for and, pipe symbol which we use to denote or, and the exclamation point which is used to not consider certain types of values. So you'll see in this first example that I'm going to pop up here that I'm just filtering in the procedure column on the word chest. Okay, so we're basically looking at all chest studies. Anything that has chest is now filtered in on my list. Anything including it. But let's say we'd also like to just see studies that are chest, but also have without contrast, right, or WO in the filter. So this is where I'm going to use the and in this case. So I'm going to add and WO to give us anything that contains the word chest or WO. So it's basically filtered everything out but that. But let's say, hey, wait a minute, I didn't want my list to take out my x-rays of the chest. I still want to have those on my list as well. So this is we're gonna move on and use the or the pipe symbol. So we'll put the pipe symbol in and the word XR chest. So now we see we have anything that has chest and WO in it or without, as well as anything that contains XR chest. So now we've got our list including more of these here. So the pipe symbol, I wanted to just tell you real quick, in case you're wondering where that is on the keyboard, because that's sometimes a unique symbol that most people never use for any reason. It's typically above or near the enter key on your keyboard. It shares the button with the backslash. It's above that. So you'll hold the shift key down and press that key to get the pipe symbol if you want to manually use that. All right, so now we're looking at our list and we're saying, you know what, I don't want CTAs of the chest on here. I'm not interested in those, any CTAs. So let's say we want to get rid of CTAs. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to use the exclamation point and use a not filter. I'm going to add that to my list here. So I'm going to say anything that's a chest and without contrast, but not CTA on this side I want to use. I can't just do another or pipe symbol and add not CTA, because what that would do is give you everything chest and without, anything, add anything XR chest, and then also add anything that's not CTA, which is including a lot of things we've already excluded from the list. So instead what I do is I add that here, and I'm just going to add and not with the exclamation point CTA to this side as part of the description here. And you'll notice also I've added parentheses on the outside here. I've done that because I've used more than one and in the same string here. When you end up doing that in conjunction with an or the pipe symbol over here, you'll get mixed results. So you always want to separate this out so it does this whole operation here first and then says or XR chest. So you notice now we have everything that has chest without but does not have CTA in it. So the CTAs are now gone and I still have my XR of the chest. So that's some nice advanced filtering you can do here, without, being strictly limited to just one value or, certain values in the selected value that you normally do. So moving on, I want to also talk about the flags column because it's a little unique among the columns. The flags column, if you right click on it, the column itself does give you an option to deselect certain flags you don't want to see in that list. So there may be certain things you're absolutely not interested in knowing about because, the more flags you have, the wider this column gets, and you may see things you don't want to see. So you do have the ability to right-click on that list and then just manually deselect the ones you don't want to see. In addition to that, when you're filtering on the flags column, in this case, when I entered a value up here, I could do select values on the flags column if I want to. So you can always get, filter on the ones you want. But in this case, I've typed in the letter V because I know the letter V is the alphanumeric code for IVT required. So it's just this letter V. Each flag has its own code associated with it. It's a single character. It's important to know that if you want to filter on that value. So you may ask, well, what are those? Because if you go to the select values column, it doesn't actually show you what that code is. Once you pick it, it'll pop it up in here. So I've done a little bit of the work for you and actually created a list. If you want to grab a screenshot of this or save it, this is a list of all the currently available flags and their corresponding alphanumeric codes. So this is handy to use. For filtering, you can kind of get away with it by doing the select values and get what you want on there, or take them out by right-clicking on the column. But if you wanted to do any conditional formatting, which we're going to get into next, you'll need to know this code if you want to do conditional formatting on the flag, because you can't just type in allergy. You need to use the letter R when you do conditional formatting. So let's go ahead and move into conditional formatting. We're not going to actually go into the flags themselves with conditional formatting. Let's talk about what conditional formatting actually is. So what is it for? What do we do with it? Basically, it's a way to call attention to specific items on a work list by formatting an individual cell or the entire row using background color, font size, font type, font style, or text alignment. So all these things can be changed in the cell or row of data on your work list. Let's go ahead and go do some basic options conditional formatting. And let's say we're going to work on the stat read column here. And I'm going to just say, I want all my stats, the background color of the cell for this stat to turn a red color. So the first thing I'm going to do is right-click on the stat read column, and I'm going to choose conditional formatting. When I do that, another dialog box opens, the conditional rules, formatting rules manager, and you'll notice it's automatically labeled the rule item number 0. Now, you want to give it a name that makes sense to you because you can do multiple rules, and when you have all these rules applied, you're going to want to be able to modify them perhaps in the future and want to know which one you're messing with and don't want to have to pick from a weird list, right? So give it a name that makes sense to you. You'll also notice the column header I chose, which is the stat read column. It's automatically applied that here and which rule it's going to apply to. This is a drop down, so when you're building multiple rules, you don't have to always exit out and right click on the column. You can choose the various columns you want to work on right here from the drop down. We're going to move down here where it says cell value. We're going to pick a value to put in here. We're going to pick a value to an operator to filter on, and when we do that, I'm going to pick equals to. We have options similar to we did in the filters, contains, starts with, things like that. And you also have a value 1 and a value 2. You're almost always just going to use value 1. Some of the options you have are, say, is between value 1 and 2, and that's where you would use a second value if you use an option up here for that. We're going to focus right now on just equals to value 1. And in this case, I know that the stat read flag, if it's set to Y, that means it's stat. If it's set to no, that means it's not stat. I know that value, so I'm going to put that in here and put the letter Y. And we're going to pick a cell back color. The cell back color is basically the color of the cell. The cell for color is the font, is the color of the font. Now, you don't actually have control over the color of this check mark. It's not really a font, it's an independent object. So you don't have control of that color, so cell for color wouldn't work for this one. So we're going to choose cell back color. When we click in there, we get the little ellipsis box becomes available. So then when I click on that, it brings me a color dialog that I can pick from the palette here. I can either choose the palette, but I prefer to go to the web tab up here and pick a color from here. So I'm going to pick the color red in this case. I'll click OK, and you'll see that the red color applies here. And now I can apply the rule or click OK. If I intend to continue working in the dialog here, I will click Apply. If I'm done, I just click OK, and my formatting will apply to the list. I'm going to click Apply because I don't want to close the dialog box, but you'll see my list now has highlighted everything red, and you'll notice the check mark because it's this red color turned to white. That automatically is going to change that color depending on how dark or bright of a color you pick here. And again, you don't have control over that color in this particular area. But we do have control of the color of the fonts here. So let's say, well, this isn't good enough. Maybe this is out of the scope of my vision, and I also want to color the font here red as well. So let's take it a step further. I'm going to go and pick, in this case, the whole row. I don't want to do just the cell since I can't control that color. I'm going to do the whole row. And I'm going to pick a row 4 color, which is going to be the font. So I'm going to click here, and then I'll click the ellipsis again, which is going to bring my color palette again. And in this case, as a recommendation, you can still choose the bright red if you like. I always recommend people choose dark red or some other darker color to highlight this, because the bright red is pretty light. It makes it hard to read what's in the column once you pick it. So dark red is a little bit easier to pick out. So we'll go ahead and pick that, click OK. We'll notice that highlights here. And then I also want to call your attention to down here. You want to check this box that says apply this formatting to the entire row. If you forget to check that, even though you're telling it to do the row color, it's not going to apply to the row. So you need to check this box as well. So we'll do that. We'll click apply or OK again, and you'll see now it's colored this. You can see it's a reddish color. It's not too bright. You can still read the font well. Looks great. So now let's move on forward a little bit more. And let's say we want to format the font of the procedure column. Okay, so we're going to create another new rule. Okay, so we're going to go over here, we'll add a new rule, and instead of exiting out, right-clicking on the procedure column, I'm going to go ahead and go to the drop-down here, and I'm going to pick procedures. Okay, you'll see it pops that in there. I've also decided in this case, I don't want to just put something in here and try to figure out what values to do. I'm going to say, in this case, do not equal to value 1. I'm going to just pick some value that would never be in the procedure column. In this case, I just pick ZZZ. And that's going to then apply this formatting to everything in the column. So I'm going to change the cell font, and I'm going to click in there and pick the ellipsis button here, which is going to give me my font choices. I'm going to pick a font style that's very different from what we're using right now. So I'm going to switch to Comic Sans, bold italic, and increase the size to 12. Okay, then we'll click OK. You'll see it's put those settings in here. I'll go ahead and apply that. And you'll see now it's made that change. It's made it much larger, changed the font style to Comic Sans, italicized it and bolded it, and you can see things a lot better here now. The one other formatting choice that we've not gone over yet is the alignment. So what I'm going to do in this case is take the performed end date here, and I'm going to move this alignment. Right now it's kind of centered and to the left-hand side of the column. All right, so let's say I want to move this to the bottom and to the right-hand side of the column. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new rule. And we're going to make this the alignment, and I'm going to pick the performed end date. I already did that in here. We can see the text alignment is defaulting to middle left. I'm going to click the ellipsis button here. That shows me where I currently am, and then I can pick whichever one of these grids over here I want to marks I want to choose. And I'm going to pick the one on the lower right, and we're going to see that calls it bottom right. And once I apply that, you're going to watch this jump over to the side here. You'll see it jump over into the bottom right. So you can also play with the alignment of these if you want to move them one way or the other, maybe make some information get closer to another column and make things a little bit easier for you. So those are the alignment functions. So those are the basic functions you can do in here. But let's say, for instance, we want to do something a little different. Maybe we have some values we want to highlight in one column, and we're going to talk about expressions as a way to do this. Let's say I have my list here, and I don't want to look at my referring. I don't want to highlight the referring, but I want, because perhaps I have this off my list somewhere and I don't see who the referring is. But maybe everything that Dr. John Wilson here has done, I want to see everything that this referring does and just highlight the procedure column, right? So there's not an easy way to do that just from the basic rules. We have to use what's called these expressions, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and create a new rule on the procedure column here, and I'm going to label it CT from Wilson, and I'm going to color everything green, okay? Well, how am I going to do that? I want to color everything from him green on the procedure. I'm going to use an expression, okay? And to use an expression, I need to open this expression editor. Okay, so I'm going to click this. It's going to open up a new window. Okay, so our expression builder here gives us a lot of functions, operators, things to choose from in here. And we're not going to go into a lot of detail what all these do because we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to do a few basic things here, but the first thing you're going to do is go to your fields column. Okay, the fields column here basically gives you all your column header. All your columns are listed here. Now these are only the columns in this work list. You can't do anything that doesn't already exist in the work list. So there's a lot of data elements in the list, but only the ones that are in your columns on the work list are what's here. You'll notice that these items here do not necessarily correspond to how the column header is labeled, right? The column headers are labeled in a friendly manner. The procedures column, for instance, is the same, but the referring physician is not the same as referring physician in the database here. It is requested by, right? So I know that, you may not know that, or the easy way to figure out which one it is, the order your columns are listed from left to right in your work list correspond to the list from top to bottom here. So you can just count down to figure out which one it is. So I know the reading stat flag is the stat read flag. The flags are still flags, performed end date, that matches, but requested by is referring physician. So what I've done here is I've just double clicked on this and it's popped it up here for me. Now you could also just type this value in, but it does have to be exact, requested underscore by, so you want to put that in here. And then I could click on the equal sign here and put that in. Again, I could type that in as well if I wanted to. And now I do have to do a little typing where I do have to type in, what is that physician's name, right? I know it's Wilson, John, and I have to put it in exactly that way. I can't put John Wilson. I have to put how it is in the database. So usually what I'll do if I'm doing this, I've already copied it. I'd right click and copy paste that cell and put it in there, or I can just remember, I'm going to put Wilson, John, John, surrounded by quotes. You have to put quotes around it in order for it to work. Okay, so once I have that in here, I'm going to go ahead and click the OK. That's going to bring me back to my work list. And remember, I had already put in there that I wanted to filter it green. So it went ahead and did that. I applied it. And now I've colored everything done by Dr. John Wilson green. Well, let's say I want to take it a step further. I don't really care about his x-rays. I just want the CTs to be green. Well, I can do that too. So I'm going to go back to my expression builder. Okay, and what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to add and I can click on and, or I can type it in, but and is the operator. So I want to do everything requested by Dr. Wilson and modality type. So I'm going to double click to add that. So I'm going to add modality type. Or I could have typed it in as well. Equals CT, surrounded by quotes again. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put that in. We'll say OK. And now you can see when we apply that filter, it just has CTs done by John Wilson. Let's take it one more step. Oops, I forgot John Wilson's partner, Bob Arnold, down here. He's part of the same practice, and I want to have that included as well. I can do that too. And just to show you that I don't have to go back to the expression editor every time to do it, I can actually type that in the little box here. So if I am comfortable with writing the expressions myself, I don't have to go to the editor to do it. I can actually just type it in here. So I'll just quickly type that in here. And you'll notice also when I did that, I did put parentheses around this when I've added requested by, I put it's requested by Wilson John or requested by Arnold Bob, and I've surrounded that by parentheses saying these two values and also modality type CT. So it's a little more complicated, but once you get the idea of how to make those rules, you can just kind of pop those together. And then we'll click the apply, and we'll see we've added Bob Arnold as well. Thanks for joining, everybody. This has been Advanced Worklist Filtering and Conditional Formatting, and we look forward to seeing you guys on the next presentation next month.